Imagine a world where there were no laws, where kings ruled by whim, merchants cheated without punishment, and justice depended on who you knew. Then came Hammurabi, the Babylonian king who changed everything. His brutal yet brilliant legal code didn't just shape ancient Mesopotamia. It laid the foundation for every legal system that followed, from Rome to modern courts. But behind his laws were wars, betrayals, and a vision of power so ruthless it still echoes today. This is the story of the world's first great lawgiver, and why his legacy might surprise you. Under the golden sun of Mesopotamia's Fertile Crescent, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers nourished the world's first great cities, a child was born who would change human civilization for all time. Around 1810 BCE, in the minor kingdom of Babylon, Prince Hammurabi was born into a world of brutality and paradox, a world of breathtaking innovation and unspeakable cruelty, where great temples stood alongside public executions, and where merchants developed sophisticated systems of accounting, but warlords settled arguments with bloodshed. This was the world that would forge one of history's greatest rulers, a king whose ideas about law and order would echo 4,000 years to influence our own legal systems in ways that most people never notice. The young Hammurabi reached maturity in a Mesopotamia ripped apart by competing city-states, each with their own rulers, gods, and crude notions of justice. To the south lay rich Larsa, dominating the most fertile farming lands and governed by the elderly but cunning Rim-Sin. On the Euphrates glittered Mari, a commercial hub where traders from across the entire known world exchanged tin, textiles, and precious stones under the watchful eye of King Zimri-Lem. To the east loomed militaristic Eshnunna, its warriors constantly testing the borders of neighboring states. And above them all, in the mountainous uplands, was the ever-present threat of Elamite invaders. It was in this cauldron of competing powers that the young Hammurabi received an education no prince had ever received, not just in war and statesmanship, but in the inherent frailties of the way societies structured themselves. What Hammurabi witnessed in his youth would haunt him and ultimately compel him to revolution. He saw merchants habitually short-waiting customers with dishonest waits, secure in the knowledge that the wealthy could bribe their way out of punishment. He saw border disputes between farmers escalate into multi-generational blood feuds because there was no consistent legal system to settle them. Worst of all, he wrote of conquered cities being either brutally sacked or their populations enslaved, a waste of human potential that weakened the region as a whole. These experiences taught Hammurabi a revolutionary idea. That lasting power came not from fear alone, but from creating a system where people could predict the outcome of their actions, where business could be conducted without constant suspicion, and where even the king's authority was based on consistent principles rather than arbitrary whim. When Hammurabi ascended the throne of Babylon in 1792 BCE, likely in his late teenage years, few would have predicted the storm he would unleash. The geopolitical game board was stacked against him. Babylon was surrounded by more powerful, wealthier neighbors who saw the young king as ripe for the picking. The Elamites waited hungrily in the mountains to the east. Rim-Sin of Larsa, with 60 years of statecraft experience under his belt, considered Babylon an upstart of no particular significance. But Hammurabi exhibited the first of the qualities that would characterize his rule: patience. While other kings dashed off to glory-grabbing wars, Hammurabi devoted his first 2 decades to building Babylon's foundations, literally and metaphorically. His public works projects were revolutionary in vision and scope. Laborers dug enormous systems of irrigation canals that transformed once wastelands into teeming agricultural areas, boosting food supplies exponentially. He constructed defensive walls on such massive a scale that their tops were, according to contemporary accounts, wide enough for chariots to pass along the tops. Most innovatively, perhaps, Hammurabi invested in what we would now call human capital, investing in scribal schools to professionalize administrators, standardizing weights and measures to facilitate trade, and quietly professionalizing his military while his rivals relied upon conscripted farmers turned part-time soldiers. Hammurabi's diplomacy during these early years was as brutal as it was brilliant. He formed alliances by strategic royal marriages, only to cast them aside when circumstances changed. He sent perfumed letters of friendship to neighboring kings while plotting secretly against them. Most astoundingly, he managed to make great powers like Zimri-Lim of Mari think that Babylon was a minor power not worth bothering about, the ancient equivalent of a geopolitical sleight of hand. This careful preparation set the stage for Hammurabi's coup starting in 1763 BCE, as he launched his assault on Larsa not with a frontal assault, but with economic warfare that would make modern sanctions seem crude by comparison. By redirecting water channels and arteries strategically, Hammurabi's engineers slowly parched Larsa's fields over the course of an entire growing season. Meanwhile, his troops intercepted grain shipments and merchant caravans, causing artificial famines in what had been Mesopotamia's breadbasket. After nearly a year of this intentional strangulation, the one-time great city and its aged ruler Rimsin surrendered, but what came next shocked contemporaries. Breaking from centuries of tradition in which conquerors slaughtered or enslaved defeated populations, Hammurabi did something different. He incorporated Larsa's population into his growing empire, offering them protection under what would be his famous code of law in exchange for loyalty. This new approach, military might combined with the promise of justice, was Hammurabi's trademark as he moved north to Mari. The betrayal of Mari's king Zimri-Lim in 1759 BCE is among the coldest political acts ever. Cuneiform correspondence preserved in Mari's royal archives, incredibly well preserved to this day, chronicles years of cordial correspondence between the two rulers, with Zimri-Lim going so far as to call Hammurabi brother. When the time came, however, Hammurabi's forces swept through and burned the great city with ruthless efficiency, demonstrating his willingness to put imperial ambition ahead of personal relationships. Through these campaigns and others, by 1755 BCE, Hammurabi had achieved what no king in centuries had accomplished: united Mesopotamia fully under one rule from the Persian Gulf to Assyria, with all of the great trade routes and agricultural heartlands within his grasp. Hammurabi's supreme genius, however, lay in his understanding that conquest was pointless without rule. In his later years, he gave the world his masterpiece, the Code of Hammurabi, inscribed on a massive black diorite stele nearly 8 feet tall. Unlike the previous scattered collections of law, Hammurabi's 282 laws formed a cohesive whole addressing nearly every aspect of life: commercial transactions, property rights, professional practices, family law, and criminal justice. The upper part of the stele depicted Hammurabi receiving power from Shamash, the sun god of justice, visually reinforcing the divine approval of his laws. Though famous for severe, lex talionis, eye for an eye punishments, the code was fairly sophisticated in its distinction of intent, accidental versus premeditated harm, and in establishing proportional responses. Its three-tiered system of justice, with different punishments for crimes against nobles, awilu, commoners, Mushkinu, and slaves, Wardu, acknowledged class distinctions while still offering unprecedented protection to lower classes. Medical malpractice statutes held surgeons financially responsible for failed procedures or, in case of death, subject to hand amputation. Building codes demanded death for contractors whose negligence caused fatal collapses. Women could initiate divorce under some circumstances, do business, and inherit property, rights unprecedented in the ancient world. To run this system, Hammurabi created Mesopotamia's first true bureaucracy. Standard weights and measures appeared in markets across the land. Scribes maintained meticulous tax records on durable clay tablets, thousands of which still survive today. Royal judges made circuit tours, deciding cases based on the posted code rather than on local customs. The economic impact was revolutionary. Babylon became a metropolis of towering ziggurats, massive granaries, and teeming international marketplaces, all sustained by irrigation works that transformed the arid landscape into an agricultural powerhouse. But following Hammurabi's death in 1750 BCE, his empire slowly weakened under less capable successors who grappled with droughts, verified by contemporary dendrochronology research. Within 150 years, the Hittites had sacked Babylon, but Hammurabi's legal precepts were more lasting than his empire. His concepts affected Mosaic law, Rome's 12 tables, and eventually modern jurisprudence. The very notion that laws are to be public, consistent, and binding upon rulers is his most enduring legacy. When French excavator Jacques de Morgan unearthed the celebrated stele at Susa in 1901, where Elamite invaders had brought it centuries earlier, he uncovered not just an artifact, but the birth certificate of legal civilization. At the Louvre today, the weathered stone confronts us with ageless questions regarding justice, power, and social order. As we struggle with 21st century dilemmas ranging from internet privacy to corporate morals, we're still building on foundations Hammurabi chiseled into that Babylonian stone over 4,000 years ago, showing that the human quest for perfect justice is very much a work in progress. What do you think? Was Hammurabi a visionary ruler who brought order to chaos, or a tyrant who enforced brutal punishments? And could a legal system like his work today? Let me know in the comments.